Hi everyone, wherever you are. I hope you're having a wonderful start of the week so far. We're here with the latest episode of the Inside Crypto Show, interviews and discussion with regular people just like yourselves. Today we are joined by my coworker Yubo Li. He's the Associate Director of Investment Strategy at Amun 21 Shares. Very well educated in traditional finance, he's been in the crypto space for a short time and has proven he has the chops for creating unique strategies. We have to do the usual disclaimer. Anything said by either Yubo or myself does not constitute financial advice. Our opinions are our own and are not to be connected with our employer. Please do your own research. Because it's just Yubo today, he can spend a little bit more time diving into his background before we get into crypto. Yubo, welcome. Thank you for making time just before dinner. I appreciate it. Tell us about yourself.
Sure, definitely. First, Crime, thanks for having me today. Start with my career. Actually, I started as a quant strategist with strategic asset allocation and solutions team. My role by that time is to develop investment strategies that have uncorrelated risk and return profile to a traditional investment. And the philosophy behind this is diversification, which people usually refer to as the only free lunch you could harvest in investment world. And later on, with the popularity of three investment strategies I developed with clients, we decide to launch those as ETF products to make it more accessible to a broader audience base. So this is how I get into the ETF world. Later on, I started managing the whole suites of the company's ETF products, ranging from equities, fixed income, to alternatives. And my story with crypto started in 2017. I met a friend who is actually a CTO of a crypto hardware company, and we met each other through the P2P car renting platform called Turo. So he's the one who lead me into crypto and show me all the advanced stuff and also tell me how to utilize Ledger to do a cold storage to make my assets safe. So my story back in 2017, due to the nature as I was a trader and portfolio manager, I do a lot of speculative trades trying to arbitrage on the tactical opportunities I could find on the market. And what happened is because of the speculation nature of the trades I'm doing, and without diving deep into the technology itself, I didn't develop my belief, or you can say the faith, into the crypto space, which the FUD in 2020 actually drives me to unload a big part of my crypto investment in 2020, right before the dawn of the next bull cycle.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know it's terrible. It's such a great lesson for me to learn in my investment career that I found lacking the belief and stay some kind of blinded to what happened to the market, like the NFT and DeFi going on with the market by that time, and making too much speculative decisions is not a sustainable approach to access this new asset class. So therefore, I started to dive deep into the blockchain technology and learn about the tokenomics with a long-term driven approach. So the more I read and learn about this technology, the more faith I start to believe, and the more people refer to diamond's hands I start to have. So now with my experience both into the traditional ETF world and believe into blockchain and crypto myself, I'm so lucky to find the sweet spot between those two and join the largest global crypto ETP issuer, 21 shares, last year in November.
Fantastic. So we have a lot of young people who listen to this podcast or watch the YouTube. Like, how did you fall into this role? Quant strategist is a very big role and a very complicated role, right? I don't think it's
Mhm.
for everybody. Like, when you were growing up, were you just really good at math, or you already knew I wanted to be a quant strategist when you were 6 years old or something? Like, how did you know this is what you wanted to do?
Exactly. So I was a data-driven guy, and the reason I dive into the quant world is really back to my investment logic. Usually, when I try to access a new investment idea from the ideation stage, I always like to think about the assumptions behind that investment ideas. And the next is, with that assumptions in mind, how could you quantify and build a systematic approach that could convert your ideas into investable strategies? And in this process, because it's data driven, you're going to run a lot of back tests and especially in a historical scenario, see how it fit into the strategy you develop. And to me, the whole process over here is amazing. This is how I get into the quant strategy world because I like to speak about facts using data as backup.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned about the unfortunate circumstance of 2020, right? I mean, it's 2022 now. You're a lot more mature. I'm a lot more mature. I've made tons of mistakes as well. What do you see yourself like? How are you dealing with FUD now? And for those who don't know, fear, uncertainty, doubt, are you listening to some of it or are you just ignoring FUD altogether? How do you handle the media surrounding crypto and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, that's a good one. So this year, I way more calm experience the current crypto winter, like the very bearish sentiment as it is now, because it's experienced the exact same thing as back in 2018 and 2020. And usually the first time you experience, the next time you just have more calm in nature. And to the FUD, I always like to listen to FUD. And the reason why is it could actually help me into the risk management side of developing the investment strategy. Because although it's called FUD, there's still some good insights with the FUD going on that could help you pay attention to some part of your blind spots you might not pay attention to when you develop your investment strategy. Which back to the thesis of what are the key assumptions you have when you develop a strategy and utilizing FUD to test those. And it's actually a great one for me to help me find the blind spots and build that into the risk management system I have.
And it's true, we've seen it played out like the last 2 months as people dive into 3AC and people like
Mm.
6 months ago or 8 months ago, there was this sliver of a tweet thread somewhere and somebody looked into this wallet like, oh guys, you should be careful of 3AC. And people like, no, that's fun. And then lo and behold, here we are in 2022. We see exactly like you said, even some FUD has some basis in truth somewhere, maybe. So,
Exactly.
yes, so that totally makes sense as well. Okay, Yubo, I really appreciate your background. And if anybody has any questions, we'll talk about where you can ask those at the end of today's show. But let's dive into today's topic. Yubo proposed this topic, and I love it because that is something you've seen in social media, in YouTube. Are we in crypto winter? What are the opportunities? But before we get into that, we have to talk about the macroeconomic situation. And while you were in America, I'm in Taiwan. This is something that's affecting every country from the west to the east where I live right now. But we're going to focus on the US, right? Because after the US, things sort of have a knock-on effect. So, Yubo, what's your feeling about the global macroeconomic climate? Is America in a recession? Is the world in a recession?
Yeah. So it's highly probable that US officially enter into a recession now. As the textbook definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. The US already experienced a fall in Q1 GDP growth with the number of negative 1.5%. And there's the latest revision, which published 2 weeks ago, make it even worse, which is just to negative 1.6%, even worse than the consensus. And although the Q2 GDP number haven't published yet, the Atlantic Fed releases a running estimate of the real GDP growth based on available data for the current measured quarter called GDP Now, which usually people refer to as the leading indicator. And the latest estimate from GDP Now, which released last Friday, is negative 1.2%. So although we still want to wait to see the confirmation from the Bureau of Economic Analysis on July 28th, GDP now is usually not very far off from official data. And the average absolute error for that estimation is around 0.84 percentage points. So with the GDP now showed a downtrend as well, with both in mind, most likely the US is already in recession now.
Okay. So, I mean, looking at the US and at the globe, how do recessions or high interest rates, how do they affect investment strategies? You're in the States or somebody doing what you do in England or in Moscow or in China or Taiwan where I live. Like, how does that affect the way people create investment strategies?
For investment strategies, ultimately you are picking up any potential asset class you're in favor of, and which is back to the valuation of those asset classes. So when you think about valuation, most commonly used model is discounted cash flow. So what does that mean? Discounted cash flow have two major parts. One is your future potential cash flow, and of course, your future growth rate, which indicate how much cash flow you're going to have in the future. The other part, which is the discounted part, is discounting with an interest rate with what you're going to experience next, which actually a reflection of the borrow cost for you to operate your business. So think about those two parts. What happened in recession? So with inflation and increasing Fed interest rate, what happened to the global assets is you have an increase on the denominator, which will drive down your overall asset price. And on the cash flow side, the same incentive with what happened to the supply and demand shock. So with this supply shock, which create a natural less demand to the overall market, all the business around the globe will expect to have less cash flow in the future. So this is a double side push to dampen the global valuation. So you have both the denominator side effect that will just lower down your overall valuation, and you also have less cash flow expected in the future due to the recession nature. So that's what happened to the global valuation, which back to the investment strategy side, you always have to consider those two parts into whatever investment strategy model you're building.
Wow. I had heard of DCF before and I never understood it until you just explained it right now. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Of course.
We are a crypto company at Amun 21 shares. Crypto has come down a ton since the highs of 2021. In your knowledge, why has it happened this way? Critics have said this has been a big thing. Again, another theme in the media. Crypto was supposed to be a hedge against economic uncertainty, against inflation, but it looks like it follows traditional markets in some ways. What's your thought about that?
This is a great question. So the sharp downturn as we experience and the high correlation with traditional markets has been one of the most attacked points on crypto investment from critics recently. I view this question from two angles, strategic and tactical. So on the strategic side, I always ask myself, did the investment thesis and fundamentals of crypto investment change? To me, the answer is no. Using Bitcoin as an example, are there any major development changes the fundamental of Bitcoin? There are still 21 million total supply, and the network is running as smoothly as it was 10 years ago. So without the strategic change, let's look at the tactical side. So on the tactical side, as we 21 Shares closely monitor the developments on the market with our research team, three major reasons come in mind. The first is global macro-driven liquidity tightening. So many developed countries, central banks start raising rates aggressively, following what the US Fed is doing to tackle inflation. When there are less money on the market, high risk asset classes with high liquidity profile are usually the one that hit the first and the hardest. Think about how easy you could sell one Bitcoin on whatever exchanges, either DEX or SEX, versus illiquid ones like real estate. So first, global macro-driven liquidity tightening. The second is the risk of trade on innovation. Crypto, with its nature, its innovation and revolution nature, makes it highly correlated with innovative stocks. And investors need a framework to value this new technology. And naturally, technology is the sector people will refer to as a benchmark. So back to what we just discussed on the DCF model, due to the recession fear, the increasing inflation, and less cash flow expected in the near future, you see a sharp revaluation of the technology stocks. And the same logic applied to Bitcoin and the other cryptos as well. And the third is actually the contingent risk across the crypto market drives the revaluation of this asset class. So starting with the crash of Terra Luna, which we have a previous podcast specifically on this, and with what happened with USD and Anchor Protocol, the leverage trade initiated by the large players, for example, hedge fund like Three Arrow Capitals, and centralized finance firm like Celsius, because of their poor risk management process. Those contingent risks ultimately blew up their books. So when there are a lot of uncertainties, it means a lot of risk. The market need to digest and estimate the impact, which actually led to the repricing of cryptos recently. So credit is being destroyed and withdrawn, as we see in the broad market. Underwriting standards are being tightened and solvency is being tested almost across all crypto firms. So everyone right now is withdrawing their liquidity from those crypto lenders. So with those three reasons, what I view is more on the positive side. So once things settle down and credit rebuild with confidence, we will see the revaluation narrative will start dominates over the contingent risk uncertainty in the medium term, which actually potentially could be a bullish sign to watch in the crypto market.
I definitely agree, and a very thorough analysis. Another thing that's been around in the last probably a month or so, the big number of, oh, we used to be almost at 3 trillion and now we're down to under $1 trillion. And a lot of that liquidity has gone out of the market. And you made
Mhm.
another good point as well, is that, yeah, it is easy to sell, convert your Bitcoin into USDT or USDC and cash it out into whatever your local currency is. But it is difficult to sell a house, going through all the paperwork or selling your shares or something like that. So it does totally make sense. But given that we've dropped $2 trillion roughly, this is a better question, is do you think it'll be easy for us to regain that value? As you saying, the market is reevaluating crypto as a whole. It took a while to get up to $3 trillion. Is it going to be another while? Are we in a like a 5-10 year timeline to sort of recover that liquidity?
That's a great question. I hope I have the crystal ball to tell everyone when we're gonna get back to 3 trillion, which I personally wanted to get back to that level. But the narrative, especially related to investment, would always focus on the long-term strategic view of this asset class. So by the time when we reach to that 3 trillion market, think about how many part of that is actually driven by the bubble of the valuation and how much is driven by the initial valuation from the asset class and how much is actually driven by the use case of all those crypto technologies. So the part we should focus on is really the valuation piece, the true initial valuation, and the thriving of this technology itself, but not rather focus on the bubble. This is a way to help and guide you to thrive through the current 1 trillion market back to 3 trillion market without suffering a significant loss. For crypto, it's a highly risk asset class, and we're gonna keep seeing drawdowns or a large revisions as we experience right now, like over 65% for Bitcoin and 70% for Ethereum, or even worse for the altcoins. But focusing on the value trade, focusing on the long term, is a way for you to thrive and enjoy a smoother ride from 1 trillion back to 3 trillions. But on the time horizon, it's a very difficult one to predict because what I will focus on for from that 1 trillion back to 3 trillion trade again is on those highly valuable and highly like those cryptos, those altcoins that have a high potential and a use case and the innovation part into their valuation.
That's sound logic. Now we're at the sort of core part of today's show, which is the most interesting talk. We talked about this topic, which
Mm.
is we are in the crypto winter. Some companies are coping and others are not. In preparation for this podcast, we chatted about it. And you mentioned 3 strategies to tackle crypto winter. Do you want to explain to our audience what those strategies are in your mind?
Definitely. Whenever I talk about crypto winter solutions and Swiss, I always get excited. So three ways, as you mentioned, is really reduce expenditure, broaden the sources of income, and add diversification. So start with the first one, reduce expenditure. So we have seen investors demand for low cost exposure to this asset class, especially for the long-term strategic investment. As we do see more institutional clients start to get on board and trying to access those asset class without really worrying about the short-term volatility, but more focused over the long term. So when you focus over the long term, the cost to access this new asset class is very important. So that's why as 21 shares, we actually recently launched CBTC with only 21 bips management fee. And it actually the cheapest crypto ETP globally that investors could access. So back to the logic, reduce expenditure. So finding those investment strategies or products that could give you the same exposure but with lower expense ratio is one way to tackle the crypto winter, especially for long-term investment. And the second is broaden the source of income. So what could be the income with the current crypto winter conditions? Actually, there are many tactical opportunities investors could take advantage of. So when everything is bullish, a certain risk premium is not as attractive as a general market exposure. When everything rises, it's better you just ride over the tide. And for less expected return strategies, it might not be as attractive or even shining as just getting the common market exposure. But when we are in the downfall, like we are experiencing right now, those strategies could actually offer an uncorrelated buffer to the general market. So for example, short exposure to crypto market for hedge and some tactical positioning, others like a risk control strategy that is able to make crypto investment stable on the volatility perspective, which over the long term do have a better risk adjusted return profile. And another common one people could harvest on is the volatility premium, which you take advantage of the discrepancy between realized volatility and implied volatility in the crypto's derivative market. And the last part, add diversification. So this is the philosophy 21 Shares has, and the same philosophy when I develop the investment strategies is add diversification. Diversification has two angles. One is think about just adding crypto investment into your portfolio. With our recent published research, it has a huge diversification benefit over the long term. And the second piece is diversification inside crypto investment. Rather than just invest into a single Bitcoin 100%, there's actually diversification benefits among cryptos, right? Which is, again, another free lunch for you to harvest inside crypto investment. So if you look at 21 Shares, there's a wide range of index-based products. Make crypto investment itself diversified that go beyond a single Bitcoin investment. So with the above mentioned and with the three resources you could take advantage of, reduce your expenditure, broaden the sources of income, and diversification, which you can add diversification even inside your crypto investment. So stay tuned with the upcoming product offerings and solutions for crypto winter suites and solutions from 21 Shares.
Definitely. You mentioned short exposure, and this is one of those things that people have said you should stay away from shorts. How do investors handle the idea of short exposure? Because it is a fantastic idea, and that's something again you see is like people say, okay, the market is terrible. One way to take advantage of it is through short exposure. But how do you handle that risk that comes with short
Mhm.
exposure?
Definitely. So actually, I personally use short, especially for hedging purposes, especially as we discussed earlier, when you see a huge flood is going on and you start seeing a lot of, for example, you start seeing those big whales start depositing their Bitcoin and Ethereum into those centralized exchanges. That's usually an indication of there's a potentially a huge amount of selling pressure you're gonna experience. When there's a huge amount of selling pressure, it means the price will go down. So this is to me like based on the research, it could be a high conviction trade. So during those time, that's the tactical opportunity you can take advantage of by taking on a short exposure, either for hedging purposes or you just want to tactically harvesting the information you have or based on the data you collect for those tactical opportunity.
That makes sense. Another question I wanted to ask is we have at Amun 21 Shares have a lot of different products. How in the crypto winter, right, when people are pulling money out of crypto, how do we entice clients and institutions to these strategies?
This is a great one. There are two major parts when we think about how to bring clients on board, especially in the current scenario. One is a research-driven process, which we have a strong research team and with a lot of research report published and with weekly analyst call to actively communicate with what happened in the crypto market with our clients. And the second is to bring them on board for more advanced investment strategies and finding what part they could utilize into their portfolio. And there's always a positive cycle in 21 Shares strategy development. between us, the product development and portfolio management team, to our clients. So we actually create an ecosystem for new advanced strategies development while actively listen to our clients' need and adjust our development plan accordingly. So crypto winter suite strategies and solutions is a great example for these, which based on the request from clients with what we experience with the market, we actually introduce those three ways to tackle the crypto winter scenario.
Nice. I like that answer. Moving on, once the winter is over, right? How do we move from like crypto winter strategies to potentially 2023 crypto summer strategies? Is there an active transition where we say, okay, I'm out of this product, moving into this product on the Amun 21 share side, or I'm out of this strategy mentally into another strategy? How do you transition between different strategies?
Totally. I would recommend separating your investment decisions into strategic and tactical parts. So stay with your strategic investment. Do not attempt to timing the market and always play a probability games with favorable win-loss ratio. So diamond hands on your strategic investment usually give you the best return risk trade-off over the long run. Second is to adjust tactical part accordingly by actively harvest the mispricing opportunities in the market. And the most critical part to help you thrive and switch your strategies from a winter into a summer scenario is risk management. So focus on bets with probability mindset. So give you a simple example. Think about betting on 10 coins, only need one to increase 10 times to make a profit if you follow equal weight approach. So think about if there's a 50% win-loss ratio you have across those different coins investment probability, all those 10 field altogether is just around 0.1%. So the math works in your favor if you make the right bets.
Oh my God, that's so smart. I didn't think about it. Okay, you just totally blown my mind away this morning. Last question, Yubo. And again, of course, you don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. What's your expectation for things in the next year? People on this podcast would know, like, I'm a believer. I'm an Ethereum miner. I don't
Mhm.
believe the Ethereum merge is going to happen in 2022, as crazy as it sounds, even though they said another 100 days. I think the merge will probably happen just before Chinese New Year in 2023, like January, February,
Mhm.
around there. That's my guess. But again, like, not financial advice. It's just something I believe from talking to other Ethereum miners and the ecosystem and mining pools and that sort of stuff. But like, for you, what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about in the next year? What do you think is going to happen? What are you worried about?
I like this question. So actually two parts. I think it will be more innovative developments and more institutional adoption. So starting with the innovative developments, human capital is always the keys to development, which I watch really closely. So think about right now, lawyers become crypto lawyers, marketing guy become a crypto marketing guy, and writers become crypto writers. So crypto related job posting actually skyrocketed according to research I saw by 400% last year alone, which outpacing a 100% increase in the general technology sector. And it's actually a hiring across all roles, not just engineering. So although market do cool down recently and we start seeing some news of hiring freeze from several of the firms, actually the trend itself is still strong without a cool down. So with more talents flight into the space, I do expect to see more innovation coming out next year. So this is why working in this industry is so exciting because when you get your view outside of the price trap surrounding cryptos and just look around, amazing things keep happening every day. The second part, which is more institutional adoption, and with decreased volatility in the general crypto investment. Why I'm saying this? Because with upcoming regulation and policy framework, there are so many smart guys and enthusiasts working with regulator to develop a crypto policy framework. So with a clear regulation and policy, I expect to see massive adoption from institutions. The current hurdle, because before I work in the large institution shop, the hurdle is usually sitting with compliance. And because of the vague policy framework, It actually makes crypto investment doesn't fit into a traditional institutional investment pipeline. And why this is critical, just think about 1% Bitcoin allocation from those companies. That will actually bring in trillions of dollars of inflow. And usually for institutions, they follow a disciplined approach. So let's take that 1% allocation as an example. Whenever Bitcoin price drop, their Bitcoin allocation will fall below 1%, which means they will step into the market and buy more crypto to bring back to 1%. So this kind of institutional behavior will ultimately dampen the crypto market volatility. Similar trend with what we already say for this bull cycle. So back in 2018, the Bitcoin annualized volatility is around 150 percentage range. And actually this year, even with all the crazy stuff going on recently, the Bitcoin annualized volatility is around 70% range. So we do see a dampen, and we expect, actually, I do expect to see more dampen with more adoption from institution with a clear regulation policy and framework. And of course, altcoins, like right now, is even higher in hundreds of percentage range, will experience similar trend with more adoption into the space as well.
Like throughout the world as well, we've seen like different crypto regulation. Like some countries say yes crypto 100%, some countries say crypto 50-50, some countries like
Mhm.
no, you can't do that. I remember like Indonesia or something along those lines, like it was Indonesia I think, where they're like crypto is banned, you can't trade it, it's against Islamic law. And again their interpretation of it, and it's not the only country as well. Like, so is this going to create like different sort of ecosystems of crypto where some countries will adopt first and the others will adopt last? Do you think those that have banned it will be banned forever? Or do you think eventually we're going to get into the global 100% crypto adoption?
Totally. That's why I always look at what the US regulator is doing now. So let's take the stablecoin USDC as an example. As you see for the company Circle, and there are several large lawyer firms actually working with Congress to strive into a CBDC product. So CBDC, which means if once the US adopts that framework, there's gonna be a digital dollar. And when you push out those digital dollars, you're gonna bring the other countries in the world aboard. And when you bring them on board, even though some of them do not favor a crypto or they even ban on this investment, with a massive adoption around the globe into either the payment system or the valuation system or even investment system, you're going to see those countries start, my expectation, they will start onboarding into the crypto world massively with what happened with the US. So US is always a leading indicator even in crypto space and also in Europe as well, as we do see some active engagement and development and very friendly positive attitude from some of the regulators like in Switzerland or in other countries. So usually for a technology like this, you're definitely gonna see a diverse opinions and a diverse policy framework over it. But once, because the nature of some of one big usage part of blockchain technology is a global payment system. So with that adoption, I do see that as a chance to bring more people on board into the blockchain technology and into the crypto world.
Nice, nice, fantastic. And that is, I think, the perfect way to end off today's podcast and video as well. Yubo, thank you so much for our audience. Like we've spoken before and we check on the company's internal Slack, and like I knew Yubo's role and his like job title. I'm like, oh my god, I listened to him speak about all this stuff. I'm like, oh god, I wish I was that smart to know all about all this stuff. Yubo, for people like to follow people who come on the podcast, they like to follow you on social media. Are you on Twitter or anything like that where people can follow you, or maybe just let people follow 21 Shares?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that aboard. And I start actually building my Twitter profiles, but there aren't too much things over there. And the same with my LinkedIn profile, definitely working on that part. So my view and decisions is so I work with research team pretty actively. So definitely recommend to follow 21 Shares Research and just stay tuned with the media coming, especially on the crypto winter suites and solutions.
Okay, I will include that. Yes, I do remember seeing your LinkedIn as well. So very cool. And you were fantastic. Thank you again for doing this. Hopefully, we can have you in a few months' time. We can talk about crypto summer potentially next year. We'll see.
Can't wait for that.
Oh, me too. Me too. And I'll let you get back. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll talk later.
Sure. Thank you, Crying. Another enjoyable discussion as always.
For sure.